Welcome back to the London Free Press podcast. I don't know if you missed us last week, but I definitely missed chatting last week, missed doing the podcast. So, very happy to be back after a nice, restful week off, though I will say that. I'm your host, Lindsay Barnett. I am joined with London Free Press City Hall reporter Megan Stacey. Meg, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back this week, Lindsay.
Thank you once again for joining me. We've got to talk about an interesting story, and the Free Press actually has an exclusive update with regards to a fire that happened at 1281 Hillcrest Ave in London. This was on February 1st. So I want to backtrack a little bit first, Meg, before we get into the exclusive. What happened with this fire on Feb 1st?
Yeah, good question. We can start with the basics. So there was an overnight fire, and really in the early morning hours. This was on Hillcrest Ave, sort of in the northeast part of the city near Huron and Highbury. And so really this was a near miss, Lindsay, and I think we can say that pretty safely. There were three women that were pulled from this fire by two guys who happened to be walking by at 3 o'clock in the morning. They were pulled from a small basement window. And, those students, one of them, they were students, and one of them talked to our reporters and said, I thought I was going to die. Like if these folks hadn't been walking by, if they'd been a few minutes later, we're not sure that we would have survived. So, turns out you've got, of course, firefighters on the scene. Then you end up with provincial fire investigators. They told us this bungalow, it's a single family home, was split into 8 different bedrooms and had 14 beds inside. So you've got a major overcrowding situation. It was not licensed. Any home, single family home that's being rented to tenants needs a residential rental unit license through City Hall. Did not have that. Really, it was this fire that brought both of those issues, the overcrowding and the fact that it was unlicensed, to light. And, there was a lot of concern, obviously, especially from neighbors who said, hey, listen, we complained about this place, right? Like 14, 15 people living in there. You see some activity, you see some people coming and going. I think there was even a neighbor who had reported seeing that volume of mattresses being moved into the house at some point. So anyway, there was, of course, some outcry there. City Hall and the London Fire Department ended up honoring these two gentlemen who had essentially saved these three women, pulling them to safety. So just a really awful situation, a near deadly fire. And as I say, I really seems like a pretty close miss. Could have had deaths on our hands. And actually, one of the deputy fire chief here in London said that at this ceremony to honor these two men who pulled the women to safety, said, these two gentlemen are responsible for preventing 3 more deaths, from fires, which tragically we see often, right, in this province. So really nasty situation. And then you've got the fallout too, where you realize, oh, it's an even nastier situation, an overcrowded unlicensed rental.
Yeah, like you said, Meg, the numbers, just again to reiterate, because when I first read this, the numbers are staggering. This tiny bungalow cut into 8 rooms, 14 people living in it. And when you say it was almost a near miss, I want to be crystal clear in saying these two gentlemen who were heroes in helping to aid in the rescue pulled some women out of this house. And they, again, it's February 1st, dead of winter. They didn't have anything on their feet. Okay. There's snow, there's frost. Some were out. They talk about not really having even anything more than a t-shirt on. Like it's frigid out. This was scary and potentially deadly. I'm very grateful that everybody got out safely. But now the question starts to arise, how did this happen? The first warning about this unlicensed rental came from City Hall almost 5 years ago. What how did we get here now?
Really fair question, right? Where did the ball get dropped? Who dropped the ball? So we submitted a Freedom of Information request to get some more information on this property because things were not adding up after the fire, right? And as you say, a pretty serious situation, a lot coming to light only because of this tragedy with the fire. And so we submitted a whole bunch of these requests, looking for more details, things like by law enforcement action that was taken on the home, emails between city officials, all sorts of things. And so those were finally released. A whole bunch of documents were recently released to us. And what we saw is, as you say, the first letter. So, a typical warning from City Hall that I'm sure goes out to unlicensed rentals often. I don't know how many there are in the city, but we know that they exist. And so, this letter essentially says, paraphrasing, this is my language, but get your place licensed, right? We know you're running, we know you're renting out this home, get your license through City Hall. It's got a deadline. They're usually about 2.5 weeks after the letter saying, you need to apply for this residential rental unit license. And of course, with that license comes requirements, things like a fire inspection, sometimes additional inspections. That's the point of regulating them, right? So we can come in, especially in a single family home. I'm not a fire expert, but you're looking for things like proper exits, right? The ability for somebody to get out in the case of a fire, and making sure that things are up to code so that you're able to rent your unit or rent this home or rent a duplex or triplex, whatever it is. So first letter comes in 2017, in October. So that's, not quite 5 years ago. There were other bylaw enforcement actions between that time in 2022, but nothing to do with an unlicensed rental. So there were some complaints about like debris, trash on the front lawn. It appears that a couple of those things were investigated, but there is absolutely no record of, anybody following up, anybody saying, hey, you missed this rental license notice, you missed the deadline here. And this letter essentially threatens legal action, right? There's also the threat that if you take too long, we're going to start billing you for the inspections that we've got to do, right? So something is really odd there. The next letter arrives February 1st, 2022, or I don't know when it arrives. It's sent February 1st, 2022. That's the day of the fire. So clearly City Hall realized we got an unlicensed rental here, and oh yeah, we actually knew about it 5 years ago. We better get another letter out. Way too late. I mean, we're talking after this near deadly blaze rips through the house and leaves students homeless. So it's unclear what went wrong there. I asked City Hall, what happened between 2017 and 2022? What other actions were taken? Is there something that's not apparent in these documents? Whole bunch of questions, right? Were charges ever laid against this landlord, this property owner who purchased the property? I think that was in 2021. So it's possible it seems there was a change of ownership at some time between those two letters as well. And what I got back was a maybe 2 or 3 line statement. It did not really answer the questions. I'm not getting any answers from City Hall. And so everybody seems tight-lipped about this. It's possible that there's ongoing or potential legal issues, right? Or attempts to prosecute here. And that may be why we're getting some of this silence. But of course, it's very, very frustrating. What City Hall did say is that there was no rental license ever issued to this property. In some of the emails between city officials, it appears that there may once have been an application, but somehow it got rejected, missed, dropped. Again, that's unclear. I can't seem to get any answers there. But what we know is that there was no license at any point, including between the first warning almost 5 years ago and the warning that was issued last February, right after this fire. So as a journalist, you don't like to leave people with a lot of questions when you're writing a story, but I'll tell you, I still have quite a few questions that don't have good answers.
I think that's my biggest point of contention with this story. I moved to London as a student, just to be perfectly clear. And I ended up staying. I fell in love with the city, but there was a time I wasn't always a homeowner. I rented different places in the city when I first moved here. And it starts to beg the question, how many other houses in the city are unlicensed? How many other houses have way too many people living in them? I know that you spoke to Councillor Mosley, and just to reiterate again, things were very tight-lipped, but I know you also spoke with a lawyer and certified specialist in municipal law. It kind of begs the question, all eyes now are on City Hall, and how many other unlicensed houses are there in the city currently being rented? We are a university college town, right?
Absolutely, Linz. And, I think that's really the question. This happens, right? I'm sure all of us can name a place where somebody is renting a room or maybe the whole home and, it's not done through the proper processes. We all know that's happening. And so the point that the lawyer made to me yesterday is, she said flat out, this probably happens more than people think. And what's the reason? It's an overworked bylaw officers who, not enough bodies to go around to enforce the rules that we have here in London. So I can't speak to that. I can't, City Hall certainly didn't provide that answer to me. Of course, it's possible. We do know that when debates have arisen about more regulation of the rental industry, city officials have certainly said, hey, council, like, hold up, just so you know, we'd need to hire a ton more bylaw officers to enforce those rules. So maybe it's possible there aren't enough bodies to circle back. You send a warning letter in 2017. I suppose it's possible that no one's there to check on what happened. But if so, certainly seems like a gap that might be worth filling, right? As you say, how many other homes, how many other rentals are in this situation? And you're exactly right, Lindsay. You end up with people who maybe don't have another option, maybe aren't even aware that, the house they're living needs a rental license. There's all sorts of circumstances like that. And those people are really getting the short end of the stick. There's not proper regulation, there's not proper inspection, like we talked about, safety issues like fire code violations that are not caught. And it's really frustrating. You can probably hear that I'm upset because, I just find that appalling. 8 rooms, 14 beds, 3 women were rescued from this home, and 12 others escaped on their own. So we're talking at least 15 people. You got to think that you're likely not living in that type of rental if you have a lot of options. We all know what the housing crisis looks like in this city, and it's pretty tight. It's pretty hard to find a rental that's affordable. So it's pretty concerning, at least to me. And you do wonder how many other homes are in this, in a similar circumstance. I wish I had a number for that. I don't know where to find that, but certainly we're continuing to ask some of those questions because it's pretty frustrating.
Well, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find those numbers, Meg, because no one's going to be like, hey, yeah, I'm running an illegal rental property. Like, no one's raising their hand to
Give me your
volunteer.
tips. Give me your tips if you've got one in your neighborhood. That's what I'll say.
That's right. I do want to talk about the house and the owner of the house a little bit, because this is a little bit interesting, a piece of information to me. So the owner of the house lives in Toronto. The house currently still being investigated, so still sitting charred, boarded up, broken glass on the property, sitting in complete disrepair. No one is going to be able to move back into the house without repair work being done and the house being brought up to code. So what's going on with the owner here? And had there been any fatalities, would the owner have been charged?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, on the surface, you would think that, and I'll speak generally, if you are running an unlicensed rental and you've been warned to license said property and you don't, of course, there may be the potential for penalty of some kind. Again, I can't speak specifically to this circumstance, but I think it's reasonable to be asking those questions, which of course we have asked of City Hall in this case. So I did reach out to the landlord, the property owner. Property records show that indeed this person is the owner. As I mentioned earlier, it looks like he bought the property last year. So again, it's a little bit unclear, right? In 2017, was that the same rental as being run now? It's a new person involved. So again, I don't think that really explains a 5-year gap, but certainly it may have something to do with the situation here. The landlord did pick up his phone. We had a lot of trouble reaching this property owner at the time of the fire. He did answer my call yesterday, but then refused to answer any questions. At first, he said he didn't have the information. He didn't understand quite what I was asking. And then he said he wasn't feeling well and hung up the phone. So before he hung up, I said, I'm going to send you an email with follow-up questions. you unsurprisingly, that email was not returned. So we don't have a lot of information from this person. I do wonder, it's kind of interesting, the state of the house now. It's possible again that this is all related to ongoing fire and police investigations there, right? The Ontario Fire Marshal's office is still investigating, so it's possible that it is left in that state for a reason. No one was able to tell me that, but that is a possibility. And it's kind of interesting, right? I suppose if you're City Hall, you say this isn't our mess to clean up. Property owners should be involved here, right? Coming to town to at least sweep up the glass. Again, I don't know. Maybe it's a requirement that nothing is touched. We're a few months on now from this situation, so I feel for everybody involved. Most especially the people who are in that place, but also for the neighbors who submitted a lot of complaints about this property and about the state that things were in years ago and are now left with, a boarded up home, like garbage around, shards of glass still there. So it's really an unfortunate situation all the way around.
Meg, I really appreciate your time and your deep dive into this story. If you're listening to this and you want to read more about it, make sure you do so in the pages of the London Free Press or, of course, over at lfpress.com. Meg and I joked that nobody is volunteering themselves if they are running an illegal rental unit. But if you are a neighbor and you see something sketchy or something's a little unnerving to you, don't feel like you're being a narc by getting in touch with the city or Meg at mstacy@postmedia.com. This really could be a matter of life and death. And again, 3 lives were potentially very much on the line with regards to this house. So always keep that in mind. It should always be safety first. Want to thank you once again for listening. If you're enjoying this and you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. We are streaming on all of the major platforms. We'll be back again next Thursday with another edition of the London Free Press podcast. Until then, stay well.